Good morning, everyone, and sorry if you were waiting for a few minutes. We had some technical difficulties, but we got them figured out, and I want to welcome everyone to another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. Today, I have Lale Lovell. She is a senior engineering engineering manager at Seagate Technology. And welcome today, Lale. I really appreciate you taking time out of your Friday to come speak with us today. So can you just, to start off the conversation, provide a little information about yourself and what Seagate Technology is and how it relates to manufacturing?
Sure. Excited to be here, Meaghan. Thanks again for inviting me, and appreciate those of you hanging on while we figured out our technical issue there. So Seagate is most well known as a hard drive company. So it's essentially a storage company. You probably have Seagate hard drives in your computers. We also sell to large companies that do, like Amazon and so forth, that have the cloud computing, and we're really getting into cloud computing as well. So we have manufacturing centers in Asia, so we're a vertically integrated company, and we make the hard drives that we design. I actually work at the design center in Longmont, Colorado, and we're actually working on making storage systems, which are rack mountable storage devices that house 100 drives and essentially work like one big hard drive, used mostly for cloud storage applications. So that's Seagate.
In terms of like the cloud storage, because I know one of the biggest things in manufacturing coming up right now is the automation of everything in smart factories. And then there's a lot of discussion around cybersecurity and 5G bandwidth and all that stuff. How does Seagate run parallel with that stuff, or how are you connected with that sort of advancement in the technology where manufacturers will need to think about, how they're saving information and storing it?
Yeah, great question. So Seagate is actually getting pretty significantly involved in different industry verticals for storage. And one really great example is we've created a system now where you can essentially, on an autonomous vehicle, gather the data off that autonomous vehicle and actually use a shuttle system to shuttle that data back to some type of central repository. So we literally are creating a product line that is a shuttle system where the bunch of hard drives kind of go in a box and they get sent via UPS to a central location. So we're trying to create a lot of customized solutions for specific industry verticals. So like for manufacturing, it would be a similar kind of concept, depending on, do you want to be plugged into the cloud, or do you want a way of getting that data that you're collecting back into the cloud? Those are all things that Seagate's actively working on.
That's great. I'm excited to see how all of that stuff, continues to develop and turns out, because there's so many cool videos out there with, robotics and how things are getting automated. And then some of the new lines of vehicles that are coming out too. It's just really cool to see all of those concept drawings. And it's kind of scary at the same time, because I don't know, I've never really been in an autonomous vehicle before, I think, except for like a train, maybe in like a big city. But being on the highway and not being able to control that car is kind of a little intimidating for me. So I'm really excited to see that. But you and I met originally at a Women in Manufacturing event, and we really got on the conversation of mentorships. And you were really passionate about something that you're working on. So I really wanted to dive deep into that opportunity that you're involved in, and some of the things that you're doing with that mentorship program and what it means to you to be a mentor. So can you give us a little information about how you got involved with mentoring and why it's important to you and some of the program that you're working on currently?
Sure, of course. So I'm a chemical engineer, and I've been in industry now for about 20 years. And I got my PhD degree actually from the University of Colorado at Boulder. And so I was very connected with that department. And about 10 years ago, I got asked to serve on their external advisory board. And one of the big things that we're working on the board is to improve alumni engagement and also to contribute to student success, kind of in a combined effort. So when the pandemic hit, we just felt such empathy for the students that were trying to graduate and get into engineering companies. It's hard enough to get a really good engineering job, but to be faced with a pandemic situation where really your networking is really severely limited. We launched something that we're calling Chemmy Buff Chats, me and several other members of the board, where kind of embracing the new virtual technology that we're all now kind of in. We started gathering alumni and essentially having like consultative sessions with undergraduates who were trying to graduate, and trying to try to give them more one-on-one targeted advice about, if you want to find a chemical engineering job out there, what are kind of the things, specific to the major that you should go after. And so we did, I think I've done about 7 or 8 of these at this point, and we've done them for both undergrad and graduate students. And we brought in different alumni to try to kind of share their stories, and who have done a lot of different, chemical engineering is a very diverse engineering field. So we have a lot of great alumni who have gone to a lot of different types of careers. So we tried to bring all those people in to kind of talk about what they've been up to and give the kids some more targeted advice, because I think it's just a really intimidating thing to come into when, you spent all this time really focused on your academics, and here you are at the end of it trying to connect all that to an industry focused position. I think it's really hard. So I think the more that people in industry can kind of pay it forward and try to engage back with the schools, I think is a huge amount of value.
I think I agree with you wholeheartedly, because when I graduated college, I didn't really know where I was going to go. I graduated with a technical writing degree, and one of the things that I was told was, oh, you could write manuals. And I'm like, I have no idea what that even means. Like, manuals, okay, that doesn't even sound really exciting. And it seems like a lot of students, especially from personal experience with my daughter, she really struggles with, even how to approach, a potential employer. And there was a lot of, I'm glad that she came to me and was like, hey, I have this interview. I'm really scared. I don't know how to talk or, what to say. And normally she's a pretty big social butterfly. So it was kind of weird for me to see her like so timid about doing this one-on-one interview with someone. So I gave her some tips, but I think that's like really important too, is when you're able to network with people in the industry that you're looking for a career in, you're able to listen to the jargon and how they talk to each other, and then feel more comfortable asking questions during an interview. So what are some of the things that you guys talk about during these Chemmy Buff sessions that you have with other chemical engineers and students?
Yeah, sure. So, some really practical tips, like how to use LinkedIn to your advantage, and how to really try to connect with alumni, because most people really resonate. Like if a student from their school reaches out to them, that's a really strong connection. And so we really try to encourage the students to make use of those connections. Another great example, like you're talking about, Meaghan, is decoding job descriptions for undergrads and grad students, right? Like this type of job, like process engineer, it means you're going to do this kind of work. So if you really enjoyed design and, doing reactor design or whatever, you might really want to look into process engineering. So we try to really help them sort of decode, the job descriptions and try to have a better understanding of exactly what it's going to be like. And then by bringing in people from different industries and different professions within chemical engineering, we sort of try to help them understand, like, this is a day in the life of what that kind of job is like. And then another thing is, we do also encourage students, if they're having trouble finding an engineering job, to look into other types of jobs that are, potentially good stepping stones, like an operator, a lab technician, those kind of positions, and try to give them some other options that they just may not be aware of exist in industry, because they're, if you plug chemical engineer into LinkedIn, you may miss, at least half a dozen job descriptions you could be a good fit for. And, students just don't know that, right? They just don't have that experience yet.
Right. I know with and it's interesting that your background is in chemical engineer because I work for a company now called PhotoFab. They're a photochemical company and they do photochemical etching, which I never heard of until they hired me on. And the chemical engineer that's there, his name is Jace. He's fantastic, super intelligent guy. I didn't realize I thought he was just like the mad scientist back in the corner of the factory
Right.
that's trying to create the solvents, but he's involved in so much more. Like he's involved from the beginning of the process to the end of the process, and he has to make sure that everything is working smoothly so that, we can get our products out on time. And then with the different types of metals we etch, there's so much chemistry involved in that as well too. And he's like it's different etching a metal with new solvent than it is with old solvent. Like you have to run it a couple times. And I'm like, I didn't know any of this stuff. So I spent like probably 2 hours with him one day just listening to him talk. And he's like, am I like boring you? And I'm like, no, this is really interesting to me. I've never knew any of this stuff. And he was talking about some of his past experiences too with like Johnson and Johnson. Well, this was an example. He didn't work with them, but with the baby soap so that it doesn't sting baby's eyes. He's like, there's really a chemical in there that's really not good on its own. Like it can be poisonous. He's like, but because of what you mix it with, and I'm doing a terrible job explaining this because I don't have a background in it, but whatever's mixed with it, it neutralizes that chemical. So it's not dangerous. And I'm like,
Right.
that's so interesting and cool. And I think,
So there's a lot of great chemistry out there, and a
yeah,
lot of great chemistry used for a lot of positive things, right? Like I think
right,
sometimes the chemical industry gets a bad rap because of some of the historical issues, right, with environmental issues and so forth. But
right.
I think today there's a lot of great things going on in the chemical industry.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think with any kind of manufacturing, you're going to get those risks involved. Like, I'm from Illinois, and we've all known about the chem tool disaster that happened here just a few days ago or last week sometime. And I live like right down the road from that factory, and it was crazy because my husband came home and he's like, I thought it was raining outside. Like I thought a storm was coming in, but it was actually unfortunately the building on fire. So I mean, a lot of that though too with the positive things, I know they're bringing in chemical engineers to try to figure out, okay, is this now safe? What do we need to do with the water stuff that's around, and how do we figure out the air situation too? So there's a lot of stuff still ongoing with that investigation, but it still involves manufacturing and engineering,
Right.
even with the cleanup and um, trying to make everything safe again. So um, I wanted to know, in terms of younger generations that you've been working with, what are some of the things that you've heard are the biggest pain points for either manufacturers trying to find, new talent to fill these open positions that are available, or what are some of the concerns with students who entering the sector might be concerned about or worried about?
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think for one thing, I think sometimes, especially in the chemical industry, I think students sometimes view, oil and gas or some of these more traditional chemical companies maybe not as positively, right? Because they're really excited about, environmental movements and all these things. So I think the chemical industry could certainly, just continue to kind of make sure when they're talking with younger students to really try to articulate all the good that's going on in the companies, because there's often a lot of really great initiatives to, to change and to become more modernized. And so I think continuing to kind of emphasize that is really helpful with students. um, I think students themselves struggle because they really don't, fully understand what is going on out there. One of the things we always really try to encourage students to get internships, and I mean that's one plug I will make for manufacturers, big and small. I would really encourage people to go out there and try to create internships for engineering students, even if you're a small company. A lot of universities are willing to post, your positions on their internal recruiting websites. because it's just, just having them get the experience and really understanding what manufacturing is like, I think could have a really big impact on, getting them more comfortable with going into that sector.
Mhm.
So that's my 2 cents.
Is Seagate, or you being an alum at Colorado, are any of those organizations involved with partnering with other manufacturers or maybe other organizations like WIM to help develop those internship programs and really trying to provide the skilled talent that they need to fill those positions?
So I would say that each of the individual departments, like at CU as an example, I think really does try to foster relationships with industries to help get more opportunities going. A really great example at CU in their senior design project, they actually do partner with professional firms to come up with ideas for their design projects. And I know that's pretty similar in other universities. So there's definitely a lot of that kind of initiative going on to try to help students get more exposure. And one of the things, though, that's a big struggle is because engineering is such a demanding discipline, the students will prioritize the homework or the exam or whatever over getting that industrial experience or getting that internship or making that a priority or going to some type of career night to learn more about something. So like CU, for example, I know in the ChemE department, they're really trying to get more of the students to sort of realize that engaging in your professional development is just as important as the academic thing. And at CU, they actually have a new program called ProReady, where they're actually trying to encourage engineering students to get more involved in kind of developing their professional persona while still in school. It's really challenging because, I think students are just so concerned, and it's such a, a pressured environment. I think they're just really concerned about, getting the A on that test, and they find it really hard to make room for this kind of stuff. So it's a bit more of a struggle than you would anticipate. Like you might think like for example, in our Chemmy Buff Chats, we didn't have a huge amount of turnout because the students were all very much focused on their, what they needed to do that week. So it's kind of a two-way struggle to get that engagement going.
I wonder if there's like a way, because I know testing is like a huge topic of debate now amongst different types of schooling. And, because kids learn differently, people learn differently. Some are, they can hit the books. Like my sister, she could go to the library and stay there for like 5 or 6 hours at a time and do really well that way. I'm more of a visual learner, and I like to socialize with people as I'm learning. Otherwise, I don't retain the information. I can't sit there and read, dozens and dozens of articles and take notes because it just clutters my head and it's boring and I get tired. And I think I have ADHD or something where I can't sit in one place all the time. But I feel like having a hybrid type of environment where there's not so much pressure on that academic side of things and they get graded, with that hands-on experience. I think that would be an interesting route to take. And I think some schools are starting to see that and learn that, and they're trying to develop a way to put that in their curriculum. So I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that's kind of stuff is awesome. Like there's a lot of like design teams. Like I know, like for example, there's I think it's called the Chemmy car, where literally you build a car that utilizes chemical processes to make it run. So there are definitely projects like that. One of the big struggles for the universities is engineering programs have to stay ABET accredited for the degree to be meaningful. So there's kind of a laundry list of academic requirements that you have to do to stay ABET accredited. So thus it makes it challenging to we've too, like you have to balance it out, and it's kind of a complex situation. I mean, being on the board has been a really eye-opening experience for me, just to kind of understand this more from the university level, the university perspective. So
what other challenges are you seeing being a board member in the department?
I think another really important one that I wanted to bring up today is one of the things that really surprised me a couple of years ago is we actually started talking about the mental health of the students in the board meeting, because, I mean, maybe this is more common than I appreciate, but there were actually some engineering students that committed suicide a couple of years ago.
Oh
And
no.
when I was in school, like, it was a super pressure cooker environment, but it was, I mean, I never had heard of that happening. So there's a lot of discussion about trying to help be more holistic as an as an engineering department, and actually helping the students with the mental health aspects as well. Um, and I think one of the things that we talked about as board members, and one of the things I think that mentors can really try to emphasize with students, is failure always happens, right? And I think
Mhm.
sometimes in our culture, we tend to really try to emphasize our successes, or, like, where have you been promoted and what's been your next accomplishment in your work. And I think it's really important for mentors to help students and younger engineers appreciate that it's a rocky road, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that happens, and it's still going to turn out okay.
Yeah.
That was eye-opening for me as both a board member and a mentor.
That,
That
yeah, that's really interesting because I mean, I took forever to get through college because I went and got my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, and there were days where I was just like, I need a whole bottle of wine to get through this. This is ridiculous, and it does get tough. And I think that's interesting that you brought up the term failure. I was actually part of a book club last night through the Georgia WIM chapter. I was invited by Allison, and one of the conversations that we talked about was failing and why it's such a like why it's so intimidating and why people um, feel like it's important, um, like it's a negative thing when you fail, when in reality it's failure that makes you better and it helps you grow. And the conversation like kind of took a turn where, if we didn't have failure, if it didn't happen, then we wouldn't really appreciate the things that are going on in life because we wouldn't know what it is. And I
right.
thought that was an interesting point. And I think so. And like my daughter, she's the same way. Like if she fails at something, she gets really overworked about it and she's like cries. And I tell her, I'm like, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you suck at this or you're bad at it. It just means that you don't know how to process something right away. And that's okay. You should just learn from it and figure out, okay, what did I do wrong and how can I change it to keep moving forward? So I'm like trying to like instill that in her and instill it in her friends too, because they all like, I don't know, they just kind of lose their mind when they fail at something or don't succeed at something, or if they fail a test, it's like the end of the world. And I'm like, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. You're not going to get
Yeah.
to school, like you're fine, type of thing.
I mean, that's one of the biggest things, like looking back on my career and from where I started, I used to get, just like you're describing your daughters, I used to get so worked up over failure, and I'm an overachiever bar none. And so I really went down that path. And then, so one of the big things that I've been focusing on as a mentor now is to just let people know, like, I present this put together image, but all of this crazy stuff has happened to me, and I'm still here, and I'm still an engineer, and I have a successful career. So just don't get so wrapped up about it, because especially women, I think, tend to get very wrapped up about how they're perceived, what has happened, all of the worry around, at least I do, all the worry around, what this incident and what it meant, and who, and all of this stuff. And, in reality, as you keep working, you come to appreciate, it's just work. And this is kind of the way work is.
Yeah.
But I think it can be a really challenging transition, I think, for people going from being a student to, working and especially I have worked for large companies, and it can be a really daunting experience because, you sort of become one of the army, right? And so you have
Yeah.
to kind of figure your way through.
Right. And it's funny that you brought up Army too, because I think of my husband who's a veteran, and they were just trained like you don't fail. If you fail, then it's really bad. So he's kind of in that transitioning process too. And I kind of have to like guide him as well as my daughter and say, hey, it's It's okay. And I mean, I was in the place like that too, where I was like, okay, I have to get everything done. It has to be perfect every single time. And I'm just now starting to get better. Like, oh, okay, if I don't get this done, it's not the end of the world. I can do it tomorrow. It's always going to be there. It's all right if it doesn't get done today. So, I did want to talk to you about women in manufacturing too, since
Sure.
that's where we first met. And I'm just curious because I have my reasons for joining the organization and getting involved in other organizations as well too within manufacturing and engineering. And I'm just kind of curious to hear your story of why you joined WIM and why you think it's important for groups like WIM to exist and try to attract younger generations to engineering and manufacturing.
Yeah, great question. So I got involved with WIM about 3 years ago, and I'm currently the vice chair of the Colorado chapter of WIM. And the reason I got involved is I've always been super passionate about promoting women in science and engineering and manufacturing fields. It's always been a big passion of mine. And I was actually a manufacturing manager for a while at Lexmark before I transitioned to Seagate. And it's definitely like I felt like me being in that role really helped encourage the women that worked for me about, that we can all pull this off. It's, it really, I think manufacturing is actually a fascinating field to be in because there's always something interesting going on and there's always something new to learn. And I feel the same way about engineering. My career has gone all over the place and I always continue to learn and grow. And what I really like about WIM is, you can find a lot of like-minded people and you can have some really meaningful conversations and relationships through it. We've had a lot of really great speakers. The Colorado board is great. There's a lot of great women on there. And just it's kind of just such a reinforcing experience, as a peer kind of relationship. But I also feel like there's a lot of value in kind of showing to the younger generation that these types of roles can be filled by women and that women actually can be highly successful at them. A
Mhm.
lot of really good operations managers are women. And, I think it really fits in our mindset of being able to kind of herd the cats and keep everything
Yeah.
going. I think that's a strength of women, and I think manufacturing can really benefit. So I've met so many great operations people, that have that kind of mindset. So I feel like that's why I really like WIM, um, and I have been inviting students to the WIM events, and periodically some of the students will come and just kind of get more exposure to, hey, this is out there, and especially our chapter. Hopefully soon we'll go back to having in-person tours. That was the great part. There's a lot of diverse companies in Colorado, and being able to go around and kind of showcase that to students, I think is a really rewarding experience too.
I think one of the good things about the pandemic is it has provided, well, not provided, it has forced us to use technology like this to have these one-on-one conversations or even group conversations. So I've been able to actually attend chapter events that aren't Illinois or Wisconsin. I like yesterday I did a Georgia event and then I did a Cleveland, Ohio event with Stacy Schroeder. And you're able to just kind of meet different members from different chapters, which I think is really fun and cool, which I don't think would have happened if, the pandemic didn't happen because those events would have been in person for those chapters to get together. So I really like WIM just because it does show that, hey, there are women in the industry and you're not the only person that's probably thinking something that you did feel uncomfortable saying out loud. There's other people that feels a certain kind of way or thought the same thing and you're able to be comfortable to say it out loud within those groups, which is good. And I strongly believe manufacturing and engineering is heading in the right direction because you are seeing more and more women getting up to those higher level positions and even owning companies. I've talked to several girls who, they started out as a receptionist and now they own the company that they started out
Right.
as a receptionist in. And I think that's amazing and wonderful. So we're getting close to our time, Lale. So I just wanted to close off with, asking you, is there any question during our conversation you were hoping that I asked and I just did not ask? during our conversation?
I think I got out everything. I really wanted to talk about failure because that was one of the things that I feel like sometimes gets overlooked in these kinds of conversations about mentoring. So I worked that one in. So I feel like we've hit all the bases. This has been a lot of fun. I've really
Yeah.
enjoyed talking to you. So I really appreciate the invitation.
I appreciate you coming on, and I hope, we'll run into each other in person at either an upcoming WIM event or a trade show. I am really excited because I'm working with another podcaster to do a nationwide tour for
that's cool.
manufacturing. So we're definitely getting into the beta stages of that. So when that starts happening, I'm going to reach out to all of the Mavens that I've interviewed and hopefully get to meet you guys in person, because I really am inspired by all of you. I'm just a writer for manufacturing. I don't actually get my hands dirty with creating products or anything, but I do tell stories. So every single one of you has inspired me, and I just want to meet all of you and shake your hand for doing such an amazing job in the industries that you're doing stuff in.
Yeah,
that'd
be great. If you make your way to Colorado, there's a lot of awesome places we can show you around. So that'd be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you, everyone that tuned in for this episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. We have another one scheduled for next week, so be sure to tune in again at 11:30 Central Time. I'm Meaghan Ziemba. This was Mavens of Manufacturing. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
This episode of Mavens of Manufacturing has been sponsored by Thinker. Thinker helps solve meaningful, measurable problems for organizations that change the world. Grow your business, reduce your risk at thinkerventures.com. That's thinkerventures.com.